In this fourth and final video on faith communities, mental health, and veterans, we consider the topic of belonging. What is it that makes people feel like they belong? What makes them feel like they don't? And how can faith communities foster belonging and practice hospitality? What does it mean to be communities of care and hospitality within our diverse faith traditions? Are there particular commitments of your tradition that call you to welcome the suffering among us with an understanding of interdependency and shared vulnerability with our neighbor? We will explore these and related questions by examining the experiences of persons who can often feel like outsiders, those with mental health problems, as well as veterans returning from military service. We trust that this video will spark some creative thinking on this topic, and we sincerely thank you for taking the time to intentionally consider this issue as part of the culmination of this video series.
Hello, I'm Father Bill Cantrell. In the following video, you will hear from theologians, mental health professionals, clergy, and veterans. While this represents a range of different perspectives, our hope is that as you are listening, you're considering how your community can be one of welcome, a place where those who enter your door seeking to belong may do so with acceptance, compassion, and a genuine interest in getting to know them as a person, with all the wonder, beauty, strengths, frailties, and vulnerabilities that we share as human beings. Life is filled with moments where we find ourselves seeking our places to belong. What does the invitation to belong look like in your faith community? Let's now turn back to Matt and Callie, who presented in our previous videos as they discussed their experience in trying to find a spiritual home when Matt returned following multiple combat deployments.
You know, when you look at our service members and Marines and Airmen, I mean, a lot of these individuals join the service because it's something bigger than themselves. And to be reconnected to that idea of living for something bigger and greater than yourself, to be plugged back into that is healing.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, so many of my friends are struggling, and I just think, you know, if they had someone to lean on, and a lot of them don't even go near the PTSD and and when I try to tell them, that how I've gotten help, because I'm probably the most normal out of all of them, to be honest with you.
Most healed.
The most healed. If they just had someone to lean on or to bring them in, I would say, to the fold, or just make them feel a part of something again, part of a community. My buddy, who's doing the best out of all of them that I've talked about, he's a police officer now, so he's actually part of something, part of a community. But for the other guys who don't have that, don't have families, or are on their first, second divorce, they need God, they need community, they need a pastor to actually go to them or to come to them and be like, hey, I'm here for you. What do you need? Like, just please tell me.
I can't think of anything more important than belonging. Being social animals, we desperately need other people to live our lives. From a Jewish standpoint, healing happens within community. And I mentioned earlier that the tradition says that you take away 1/60 of someone's suffering. So that the question is asked in the Talmud, well, then just have 60 people visit and get rid of it. And the answer is that indeed that could work, but only if they loved him like themselves. So I think that on the micro level, an individual who's going through suffering needs to know that there's a safety net of a community willing to catch him or her. And there are so many people who are not connected, and we really need to make bridges to them and create doorways, openings that they can find their way without feeling like they have to, we would say in our community, stop eating shrimp or take on observances that they're not ready to accept. And really be there as people. Synagogues need to provide what people need.
We have created a society of perfectionism. that everyone needs to be a perfect Muslim or perfect believer. And if you're not a perfect believer, then you're a sinner, then you're an outcast, that you don't belong. And what that does, it creates many problems. It creates the anxiety and the fear of being judged. I'm not good enough. I'm isolated from the community. I can't be part of them because I'm not a perfect Muslim. I can't go to the mosque because I don't pray 5 times a day. I can't go to the Muslim Student Association because I don't have a long enough beard or I don't cover my hair. I think we focus a lot on the fear of God and God's wrath. But I think as chaplains, we're supposed to reframe that. Almost every part of the Quran, which we call surah, every surah of the Quran begins with, in the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful, right? So if someone is scared about being judged, then you say, look, the Prophet Muhammad himself said every son of Adam commits errors, but God loves those who come to him with their sins. He wants you to come.
As much as we lie to ourselves about how good we are, I think there is a deeper still sort of an awareness, a soul-haunting question, really, that says, if you really knew me, where I don't let people go, if you really knew me, I don't think you'd be wanting to have a conversation with me. The gospel turns that on its head, because the truth of the gospel is that you belong even before you knew that there was something to belong to. It's not something you earn. So the question of belonging is the foundation upon which we have to keep coming back to that. And especially for people who are prone to live in the face of their shame and self-doubt, to hear the gospel declared in such a way that at last you've come home, I've been waiting. The parable of the prodigal in Luke 15 is the gospel in miniature, and I'm convinced that it's why it's one of the most powerful stories that even secular culture still recognizes. And so the question of belonging has been answered definitively for us in the person of Jesus Christ. He's given us this picture of the waiting Father who is yearning for us to wake up, to come to our senses, as it says about the prodigal. I know I'm going to preaching, but that prodigal son wakes up. And I imagine that even as he is making his way home, back from the battle, as it were, as he is making his way back home, he's still playing out different scenarios in his head. Okay, if I say this, then I'm gonna improve my chances of having a meal when I get home. But the Father doesn't give him a chance to even get those words out of his mouth before he's running to him, he's setting the table, he's received him home. And then the challenge is for the young man to live into that identity that was his all along.
As human beings, we have a really hard time knowing what to do with our shame. Shame is something that's a universal human experience. It's found in every culture and every community, and I think also every religious community. Shame is the emotion that tells us as human beings that we really don't belong or that we're not worthy. Shame always premises some thought that has to do with, I am not blank enough. That could be, I'm not good enough, I'm not holy enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not well-versed enough, I don't know the Bible enough, whatever it is. And that result of shame is that I don't belong here. And sometimes religious communities, unfortunately, can perpetuate those messages to say, you aren't holy enough, you aren't obedient enough, you aren't social enough. And the natural result of shame, if you think about the facial expression of shame, it's always downcast eyes and retreat. So shame, when we feel it, pulls us away from others. And so it creates this vicious cycle where shame gives rise to isolation and alienation, which then intensifies aloneness and feelings of not belonging, which intensifies isolation, which intensifies aloneness. Till before long, as a result of shame, people might be participating in a community, but not really. They're showing up and then leaving and not ever really disclosing themselves. Or they might just drop out of a community altogether. Religious communities have a deep obligation, I think, to speak to each other without primarily motivating each other by shame, but motivating each other by love and by a sense of we all belong together here.
When I got home from over there, right away, like 2 weeks later, I had my two buddies, my two best friends from overseas, drove up to Charlotte, packed me up in a U-Haul. I came down to Greenville, and we got a house, a full, it was three of us, so we got a full bedroom. And it was kind of like we, I guess, sort of isolated ourselves for a long time. For me, it was, I think for all of us, for all three of us, it was good. We just, from my perspective, we had me and two other guys we just talked to every day, and that was kind of like what I needed at the time. But it probably wasn't the best for, dealing with the issues. Because when I got back, man, my drinking was out of control. I'm not gonna say that. I'm not gonna make an excuse and say it was because I went overseas or, I just came back and I don't know, man. I don't know what it was. I think it was a little bit of everything. I'm trying to start over in the Raleigh area and starting with the different people I meet. I didn't really have a strong network, I guess you could say, back home. Just a lot of alcoholics, users, people that use and abuse you, and they just weren't good. When I originally got here, I was introduced to St. Catherine's, and but I had to be brought there to Raleigh, Wake County from Creedmoor, which was a drive. And once the other parishioners found out, they really stepped up. Every Sunday, they would pick me up, take me out to Raleigh, take me from church. We go eat lunch, and then they'd take me all the way back. So, you got these people, don't know who I am, all, probably not looking very like who kind of person they would hang out with. And, they're sitting there picking me up 45 minutes away, taking me to their church, spending time with me, taking me to, and then they would take me to lunch every day. This happened for like almost a year. It has been really helpful to get to know, I've gotten to know three of them pretty intimately. They've invited me to their home, made me dinner. They take me out to eat every Sunday, and I can tell there's this, I don't know, a sense of belonging, like they trust me. It's good to feel like that.
For the faith community to communicate, there's a place that you belong. I do believe that helps to eliminate maybe the intensity to the degree some will suffer, because it can take away some of the feelings of alienation, isolation. People can understand no matter what it is that I'm dealing with, they'll love me, they'll accept me, they'll allow for me to come. I can be a part of this faith community, even dealing with the afflictions that I might be dealing with. I can remember a young lady telling me that she knew of another young lady in the congregation who suffered from panic disorder. And when she would have her panic attacks, she invited her to call her at whatever hour, whatever time. If she could get to the telephone, she said she would. And she told me about these opportunities when the young lady is on the phone just in full-blown panic attack. And she would stay on the phone with her until it was over. I think that's what it looks like when the faith community can say, we understand enough about what it is that you are dealing with that we can figure out how to position ourselves alongside you.
I think from a faith perspective, belonging to a community is when you feel that the community has your back. If you're going through happy times, hard times, sad times, that you know there is a support group waiting for you. And maybe even before you can even tell them, they're asking you how you're doing, and you're able to freely communicate that, yes, I am going through a hard time right now. And you have the permission to do so without feeling judged or being awkward or in a situation where it's uncomfortable. And they also feel the reciprocity, and that if they feel that they're being checked in on, and if they had a problem, they could go to someone. Whether that means that they have a flat tire and they need help in fixing the flat tire, they need help moving, they're going through a divorce, they're celebrating their child's birthday or graduation. All these wonderful sociological and community feelings are there, and they're exemplified through these interactions.
In our present mental health Sunday school class, one definition of health is belonging. And our teacher raised the idea that could someone who ongoing experiences a pretty severe mental health illness, can that person be considered to be healthy? And his answer was yes. If that person is able to be in community, to have connections, to have relationships, to offer gifts, to be part of a community, I think that's what we can offer, is that you are not alone, even if I don't understand.
All of our presenters have commented in different ways about the potential for reconciliation when we are willing to enter a relationship, to listen, and to get to know the person as opposed to seeking to know what they've done or what has happened to them. The challenge is to motivate those who enter our doors with love, rather than shame or judgment. Once they experience our community as trustworthy, as a place to call home, they may much more easily begin the process of reconciliation and healing.
A lot of times congregations, especially in the Christian context, talk about being inclusive communities and wanting to include people with mental illness. To be inclusive, to be included, you just have to not be turned away. So if I live with schizophrenia or PTSD or depression and I come to a church and nobody stands at the door and turns me away, then that congregation is an inclusive community. But it doesn't mean that anybody's going to talk with me once I get there. It doesn't mean that anybody's going to interact with me or ask me anything about myself. The difference between inclusion and belonging is that to belong, you need to be missed when you're not there. Somebody needs to say, I miss you. Your absence diminishes us in some way because you belong to us and we to you. This is deeply rooted, of course, in Christian teaching about the church as the body of Christ with interdependent members that are known to each other in our vulnerability with each other. Also, Christians believe that there's a certain kind of knowing, a certain kind of belonging that happens in sharing meals together, both in the meal of the Lord's Supper or Eucharist, but also in more broadly in the way that we eat, the way that we share life together. There's deep precedent for this in the history of Christian communities and in the history of the church and also in Scripture itself.
Belonging to a faith community can be powerful and life-sustaining. However, for many, belonging is difficult or even seemingly impossible due to challenges they face as part of emotional and mental health problems. As you seek to create a place for people to belong within your community, you may wish to consider the following questions. Ask yourself, what does it look like to belong to our community? Think about those markers of belonging that exist in your faith community. Secondly, how might we foster better belonging for veterans? Finally, how might we better foster belonging for persons with mental health problems? Perhaps you have a number of strengths to build on that already in place. You do not necessarily need to create new programs, although that could be an option. Your commitment of time and attention to the topic of mental health issues, veterans, and faith communities already speaks to your desire to grow as a community of care. We hope these videos enhance your understanding of this topic, inspire renewed commitments to hospitality and compassion, And finally, challenge your community to a faithful and creative vision of care and practice.